The world of organized crime is rarely one of grand public declarations. Power shifts in backroom whispers, alliances solidify over a shared plate of pasta, and threats are delivered with a glance, not a manifesto. Real authority, the kind that needs no advertisement, is understood in the silence between words. It exists in the negative space of action. Which is why the single most terrifying display of raw, unchallenged dominion in the modern history of the American Mafia was not a massacre, not a spectacular heist, and not a televised Senate hearing. It was a funeral. Not just any funeral, but the burial of Albert Anastasia, the ferocious, psychopathic Lord High Executioner of Murder, Inc., who was himself gunned down in a barber's chair at the Park Sheraton Hotel in October 1957. In the chilling, rain-slicked quiet of a Brooklyn cemetery, a short, unassuming, owl-faced man named Carlo Gambino, who had until that moment been considered a cautious secondary player, a consigliere type, stepped from the shadows of history and into the blinding, vacant light of absolute power. He did so not by giving a speech, not by making a demand, but by simply being present in a specific way, at a specific moment, and by the sheer gravitational force of his will, compelling every other powerful man in the American underworld to follow his unspoken script. He chose that funeral to show power, and the most deafening fact of that day was the silence that answered him. Not a single soul dared to challenge the narrative he was writing in real time with his posture, his placement, and his pitiless, calm eyes. To understand why this was a revolution, you must first understand the chaos into which Gambino calmly walked. The murder of Albert Anastasia was more than the killing of a boss. It was the detonation of a fundamental principle. Anastasia was fear incarnate. His power was not political or financial, it was elemental, a force of nature. He ruled through a bottomless capacity for violence. He was the syndicate's primal id, the monster kept in the basement to remind everyone what happened when the rules broke down. His assassination, carried out with clinical precision by shooters who were never identified or caught, signaled one terrifying thing: the monster could be slain. The basement door was open, and something new, something far more calculating had done the deed. The underworld was thrust into a state of profound ontological shock. If Anastasia was not safe in a barber's chair, then no one was safe anywhere. Paranoia became the currency of the day. Every capo looked at his underboss with suspicion. Every alliance felt suddenly provisional. It was into this vacuum of terror that Carlo Gambino, alongside his cunning and equally ambitious cousin and brother-in-law Paul Castellano, stepped. They had been the architects, or at the very least the chief beneficiaries of Anastasia's fall. The hit had Gambino's fingerprints all over it in their strategic cleanliness, but they were fingerprints wiped clean by the gloves of plausible deniability. The act itself was the first move. The funeral would be the checkmate. The morning of the burial was gray and cold, a suitable atmosphere for the internment of a man of heat and rage. Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn was a landscape of Gothic obelisks and weeping angels, a stage set for the final act of a violent opera. The legitimate world saw a procession of dark cars and somber, heavy-faced men in overcoats. But within that procession, a complex and deadly ballet of protocol and power was being performed. Who would arrive with whom? Who would stand at the front, closest to the family? Who would give the eulogy? These were not matters of sentiment, they were geopolitical statements. The old guard expected Vito Genovese, Anastasia's nominal superior, and a man of immense, arrogant ambition, to assume the mantle. Genovese saw himself as the heir to Lucky Luciano's throne, a Caesar awaiting his crown. He arrived with a large, showy contingent, his bearing imperious. Other bosses were there: Tommy Lucchese, the quiet diplomat; Joe Bonanno, the proud traditionalist; Joe Profaci, the olive oil king. And then there was Carlo Gambino. He did not arrive with a large entourage. He did not make a show of force. He arrived almost discreetly, with Paul Castellano by his side. but from the moment he stepped out of the car, he began to rewrite the rules of the day. Gambino's power play was a masterpiece of nonverbal communication. First, he approached Anastasia's grieving family. He did not offer loud, performative condolences. He took the widow's hands, spoke a few soft words in Sicilian, his eyes holding a gravity that was both mournful and immovably firm. In that culture, this was not just kindness, it was a statement of assumption. It was the new patriarch comforting the bereaved of the old. He was, without saying it, positioning himself as the successor not by force, but by familial and cultural right. Then he took his place near the front of the gathering. Not at the very front, that would have been too bold, too Genovese, but in a position that was just off-center, a place from which he could observe everyone. He became the still point of the turning world. He did not mingle, he did not engage in the hushed, anxious conversations that swirled around him. He simply stood, his hands clasped before him, his expression inscrutable, his eyes missing nothing. The real moment of conquest came when Vito Genovese, feeling the mantle of authority slipping, made his move. Genovese, with his chest puffed out, began to move through the crowd of mourners, accepting the murmured respects of lower-ranking men, playing the part of the new capo di tutti capi. He was holding court amidst the gravestones. His path inevitably brought him near Gambino. All noise seemed to drain from the scene. Every capo, every soldier, every driver watched. This was the moment of potential conflict. Would Genovese assert dominance? Would he force Gambino to acknowledge him as the superior? Genovese paused, looking at Gambino, expecting the smaller, older man to offer a nod of deference, to step slightly aside. Carlo Gambino did something astonishing. He did nothing. He didn't ignore Genovese, that would have been a provocation. Instead, he slowly turned his head and met Genovese's gaze. He didn't smile, didn't frown. His eyes held no challenge, no fear, no submission. They were simply flat, like two discs of dark slate. He held the look for a second that stretched into an eternity, and then, with imperceptible slowness, he turned his face back forward towards the grave, as if the most powerful gangster in America was of no more consequence than the mist in the air. He dismissed him by absorption, by treating Genovese's attempted display as empty static. The message was cataclysmic. Your performance is for others. I am not part of your audience. The authority you are trying to project is an illusion, and I see straight through it. Genovese was frozen. To escalate here at this moment would be to break the sacred silence of the funeral, to disrespect the dead and the family in the most profound way. It would mark him as a hothead, a disruptor, an Anastasia. Gambino, by his absolute calm stillness, had trapped him. All Genovese's perceived power required the acknowledgement of others. Gambino had just publicly revoked that acknowledgement without uttering a word. Flushed, humiliated, Genovese was forced to move on, his parade utterly rained upon. In that single, silent exchange, the succession was decided. Every man present understood. Gambino had not fought for the crown. He had demonstrated that it was already his, and that Genovese's grasping for it was a pathetic theatrical error. He showed power by proving he didn't need to show it. The rest of the funeral was a coronation in negative space. When the family needed guidance on a final ritual, they looked to Gambino, not Genovese. When the bosses formed an informal receiving line after the service, Gambino's position was subtly central. Men paid their respects to him with a new tone, a deeper bend of the head. The silence around him was no longer the silence of a secondary player. It was the silence that surrounds a king, a vacuum that draws all energy and attention towards it. The consequences of that gray afternoon were immediate and tectonic. Within days, the Gambino faction, though it was not yet called that, solidified their control over the vast, profitable criminal enterprises of the old Anastasia crew. Dockyards, garment center rackets, loan sharking operations, they transferred allegiance with barely a ripple. There was no war because there was no one left to fight. Gambino had won the war before a single shot could be fired in it. He understood that in the aftermath of trauma,
What men crave is not another strongman, but stability, order, and quiet competence. He presented himself as the solution to the chaos he himself had helped engineer. Vito Genovese, his ambition thwarted and his authority publicly neutered, began a series of increasingly desperate and clumsy power grabs that would ultimately lead to his downfall on narcotics charges, arguably set up by the very coalition Gambino was now leading. The commission, the board of directors of the mob, reconstituted itself with Carlo Gambino as the de facto chairman, its primus inter pares, not through a vote, but through universal, unspoken assent. He became the new sun around which the solar system of American organized crime would revolve for the next 2 decades. But the legacy of Greenwood Cemetery is more than just the rise of a single man. It is a timeless lesson in the nature of true authority.
This claiming of the future was not a passive inheritance, but an active, meticulous colonization of time itself. Gambino's performance at the funeral was the public premiere of a character he had been rehearsing for decades, the reluctant sovereign. Every aspect was curated. His modest dress, his lack of ostentatious jewelry, his soft-spoken Sicilian dialect, all served to distance him from the gaudy, Americanized bravado of a Genovese or the feral intensity of an Anastasia. He wasn't just a new boss, he was an antidote. In the psychic wreckage left by the barbershop hit, he offered a return to old-world virtues, patience, family, silence, and a power so deep it need not prove itself. He understood that after a trauma, the collective psyche doesn't yearn for another explosion, it yearns for a still, solid point to cling to. He became that point. The funeral was the catalyst that transformed his long-standing reputation for shrewd judgment, his consigliere persona, into the perception of preordained leadership. It was alchemy. He turned the leaden, fearful uncertainty of the other bosses into the gold of his own legitimizing consensus. They didn't merely accept him, they needed him to be in charge, for their own sense of order and safety. The aftermath was where Gambino's true architecture revealed itself. He didn't seize Anastasia's empire, he administered it. His first orders were not declarations of war, but directives for calm. He told crews to stand down, to resume business quietly, to avoid drawing heat. This was a masterstroke. It painted him as the responsible steward, the one who put the organization back into organized crime. It also functionally disarmed any potential resistance, as mobilizing against him would now be seen as disrupting the hard-won peace he had provided. He then began a subtle but relentless campaign of bureaucratic consolidation. Where Anastasia ruled by fear, Gambino ruled by ledger. He demanded financial reports. He rationalized tribute flows, not increasing them, but making them regular, predictable, and documented. He was institutionalizing chaos. For the street-level soldier, this might have seemed like dull accounting, but for the capos and the other bosses on the commission, it was a revelation. Gambino wasn't just running a family, he was building a corporate group, with himself as the quiet, unchallenged CEO. His power became infrastructural, woven into the daily operations of the syndicate, making any challenge to him not just an attack on a man, but an attack on the stability of the entire system's cash flow. This infrastructural power had a dark, elegant corollary, plausible deniability raised to an art form. Gambino, the man who never raised his voice, became the man whose orders were never heard. Instructions were communicated through layers of inference, a raised eyebrow during a discussion of business, a sigh at the mention of a problematic individual. His underlings, particularly the ruthless but fiercely loyal underboss Aniello Della Croce and his more business-minded cousin Paul Castellano, became the instruments of his will, allowing Gambino to maintain the pristine, grandfatherly image. He cultivated an air of wisdom, of being above the fray. While Della Croce handled the streets and Castellano the white-collar rackets, Gambino played the patriarch, settling disputes with a quiet word, his authority now so sanctified that his decisions were rarely questioned. He became a living myth, and like all powerful myths, his true nature was obscured by the stories told.